Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, February 25th, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that even though we are a news podcast, we do try to do our best to watch our language, but let's be honest, words fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised aside from that welcome. So, how do we start off this weekend edition? Well, I don't think there is one. Really one good way to start off this weekend edition, except to talk about 2024. I know it's February, a long way off from 2024, but in the political cycle of things, they are always running at full steam ahead. And as with 2024 coming around, being the presidential election year, we do know that Biden has already said he's running. His wife, who's currently visiting Africa, said he is running. Nikki Haley of the Republican Party has announced she's running. And of course, others will be coming out the woodwork, especially now. Everybody wonders about used to be the only black person in the Republican Party, now one of two black people in the Republican Party. I guess you can call that progress. Tim Scott, as all eyes are on him, whether or not he will also be running.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott has voters in Iowa asking that question. He spoke there on Wednesday. The Hawkeye State is, of course, the location of the first contest on the Republican nominating calendar. And here's what the senator told reporters when asked if he was ready to end the speculation and give it a run.
As I have a chance to speak around the state and get feedback, it will inform and educate me on how to accomplish the mission that I really believe is the most important part of my life.
Let's bring in CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa. So, Bob, what is Tim Scott's pitch to his party, or what would it be if he decides to run?
John, good to be with you. Senator Scott rose to power in the Senate as someone who came from the Tea Party movement, was connected to traditional conservatives. So he's certainly making a traditional Reaganite type message when it comes to the economy and when it comes to foreign policy. But what makes him different, he is the lone black Republican in the Senate. He is also someone who has an evangelical faith that is intertwined with his political life. And so he operates politically in that same political space that former Vice President Mike Pence is in, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, two evangelical Christians along with Senator Scott in the Republican 2024 conversation. But he's 57 years old. Though he's that age, he's considered someone who would be a breath of fresh air by some donors like Larry Ellison and others post-Trump.
And a lot of Republicans for the last many months have been saying, you know, when they talk about the future of the party, they always land on Tim Scott as the kind of vision of the future of the party. So tell me this, Bob, what's your sense? He comes from South Carolina, important state for the primary contest, but so does Nikki Haley. How does that math all work out?
It's interesting that Ambassador Haley joined the Trump administration. Senator Scott worked with the Trump administration, but was never seen as someone who had embraced wholeheartedly Trump-style nationalism, populism, whether it's on domestic or foreign policy. So he has less of the Trump mark on him politically. Haley has that on her resume. Scott does not. So he's able to cast himself, his allies say, as someone who's friendly with the Trump voter, but independent of the Trump political operation and the Trump administration. We'll see if that can really play in a place like Iowa, where he's visiting, play in his own state of South Carolina. But he's always been a careful politician. I've covered him since he was in the House of Representatives. He's careful with reporters. He's careful with his remarks, taciturn, but he has a warm message, his friends say, in terms of talking about American sunrise. You hear that in his rhetoric now. sunrise versus the pugilism and combativeness of the Trump years. He's offering that as a contrast, not directly with Trump, who's already in the race, but certainly a contrast nevertheless.
Now, I want to ask you about the candidacy of Vivek Ramaswamy. Much of the primary jockeying, well, tell me if you think this is the case, is going to be about culture war issues. Vivek Ramaswamy has joined the race. He's the author of Woke Inc. He's gone after companies for investing in social or environmental.
So let's stop it there because they're really going into other candidates. But yes, Tim Scott, one of the last remaining remnants of the Tea Party. Now, for a lot of people that don't remember, the Tea Party for the longest time was literally and figuratively the movement that a lot of people got on because Tea Party believed in smaller government, more state choices, really a lot of extreme views. And yet a lot of them got elected really during Obama's second presidential term, Tim Scott being one of them. So with also that being said, it makes me wonder, okay, Tim Scott, let's look at his resume, shall we? The man literally and figuratively single-handedly killed the George Floyd Police Reform Bill. He single-handedly actually assisted and basically saying no to every Democratic plan that's been put out there. Even his plan of America Common Sense, which basically is a broad term plan, was essentially dead on arrival, but blamed Democrats. Outside of that, this man has really done nothing more to further influence American society or its constituents except for his own pockets. So, although at the same time, I guess we can sit there and say that Tim Scott, again, can be added to that very small list of black people that racist bigots can sit there and say that they're not racist or bigots. They got a black friend, and that's usually the black friend. But as we get to 2024, we're going to see more candidates start coming out the woodwork on the not only on the Republican side, but I guarantee on the Democratic side as well. Because I can believe, because when it comes to Biden, yes, Biden is up in age, almost he's well as into his 80s. Do I think that he could possibly have another run? Yes. Do I think that we should have another presidential candidate instead of Biden? I believe we should have choices. But this depends on who runs, who gets on the Democratic ticket, and most importantly, who the DNC will allow. Yes, the DNC, because the DNC basically shunned out Bernie Sanders because they thought Hillary Clinton would have a better shot at Trump, even though Bernie Sanders could talk circles around Trump, and so could Hillary Clinton. But at the same time, let's be honest, you have enough folks out there who didn't believe that Clinton could actually beat Trump. And as you can tell, a lot of people didn't vote for Hillary, which again led to Trump being elected. So about Tim Scott, he might have a chance. But again, like I said, 2024 is going to be a very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting year. I'll put it that way. But speaking of things that are interesting, I never thought I'd say this in my lifetime. Governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is pushing her school choice bill. Now, you've probably heard school choice, especially if you've been in the South. You've probably heard this multiple times about school choice, that these are usually done by red states. They are seen as a way of privatizing public education. Now, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, again, for all those who remember, she was at one point the press secretary for Trump, so she's pretty good at masking BS as truth. But now that she has been elected governor of Arkansas, she is basically declaring education reform as her top priority, and her school choice bill is definitely that. Now, for all those who are wondering what it actually does, because again, this is usually done by red states. So let me explain what school choice basically is. They are basically saying that the guise of it all is that they would allow parents to send their children to whatever school that they believe is the best fit for their education. Great in theory. But here's the problem. The problem is with the current public school system, there is funding that's federally regulated that goes to public schools. Private schools and religious schools do not get public funding, do not get public or federal funding. They usually get it from tuition from parents paying for their kids to go to these schools, as rightly so, because again, private or religious schools. Here's what Republicans always do. When Republicans want something, they pretty much cut funding from it. They choke funds, they choke resources from it until it crumbles on its own. And then when it crumbles on its own, then they can sit there and say, who all did this? We need to privatize this, because if we privatize this, it's going to be better for everybody in the long run. They try to do it. They try to do it with the U.S. Postal Service. Keep in mind, Remember how we always got told the U.S. Postal Service was always on life support? And if it didn't get the funding that it needed, that it would cause ramifications that would affect everyone in the U.S. Because, believe it or not, a lot of people still use the U.S. Postal Service, including Amazon for last mile deliveries and other companies as well. So the fact that a main staple of the U.S. as it is, not just in history, but in function, the U.S. Postal Service highly needed. Republicans try to kill it. Now, why is that relevant? Because Republicans are going after education as well. I mean, you guys, if you've been following this podcast, have sat there and saw that Republicans in certain states are trying to attack what teachers can teach kids. They tried to attack critical race theory, again, a class instrument that is suited for law school, not taught anywhere except law school. And yet most southern states have a law saying you cannot teach critical race theory in school, which is basically just a useless time of taxpayers' money in that case. Now, this is what they try to do. Now, that's only part of it. Now, as they try to dumb down education, keep in mind, they're cutting the education bill in half for states. Governors do it all the time. They take their education, especially in southern states, they will take the education bill and cut from it and cut from it and cut from it. And every year, the public school board for either the city, for city or county, depending on how your state's made up, have to actually make or allocate the budget in order to keep everything running. Does that mean you loss of teachers? Yes. Loss of programs, including music, art, drama, and things of that nature? Yes. However, it never does cut the extracurricular. So extracurricular things like football, basketball, baseball, and softball. Kind of find it interesting that sports never takes a hit, but everything else like music and band and chorus and drama, yeah, that or vocational services like 4-H and auto mechanics and woodworking, metal shop goes out the window, but never sports. But anyway, as they are taking more and more, and as you take away teachers and as you take away resources, what happens? Grades decline, dropout rates increase. You can even go as far as say it affects teen pregnancy. Teen pregnancy goes up. Graduation rates fall. College acceptance rates fall. So what happens? It's almost as if they don't realize they've caused the problem until someone says, well, education's in the toilet. Our children are not getting the education that they need. Not realizing that Republicans are the architects behind these things, especially in state and city legislatures. So what do? They turn around and say, oh, we're going to give you school choice. Now, if we give you school choice, that means that, well, as parents are allowed to send their kids virtually anywhere they want, these private and religious schools are saying, well, we need more funding for the overhead. The funding that they're giving these public schools, they will try to find a way to siphon them off and give them to private schools. As messed up as it is, that's usually the process. They're basically taking public funding and trying to put it in private organizations. Why? Because they want to kill public education as we know it, or have it retrained, especially if you're in Florida, as we'll go into a little bit later. They will try to reframe it because they believe that there is a woke agenda. Yes, they believe there is a woke agenda or an indoctrination that kids are being brainwashed into hidden messages, especially related to the LGBTQ plus community. I wish I could make this up, but a lot of people out there that conservative believe that exact same thing. But that in itself is the reason why Republicans should not be made in charge of education. I believe that you shouldn't be actually in charge of anything unless you have background in it. For example, if you're going to do something on education, maybe ask a teacher or a former educator. Just saying. But speaking of things that aren't making any sense, I know it's, when we go back to laws, and I keep on saying this all the time, guys, when it goes back to laws, the system was never made to include us. That's why it punishes us and rewards others. That being said, what's going on in the state of Missouri right now? I'm not gonna lie. I'm sorry, not Missouri. That's wrong. I wouldn't, but it's not that far off. It's just Mississippi. It's just crooked when it's just more crooked letter I's in it. But in the state of Mississippi, you're going to see something that's very reminiscent of Jim Crow. And the sad part is those that are creating the law seem very oblivious to it.
Mississippi is raising eyebrows for some and creating full-blown outrage for others after the Republican-led State House passed a bill that would form a court system of unelected judges and prosecutors to preside over part of the capital city of Jackson and expand the Capitol Police Force. In short, instead of giving the city's majority black residents an opportunity to exercise their voting rights to elect judges and prosecutors, the power would fall to government officials. Joining us now is one of the biggest opponents of this legislation, Mississippi House Minority Leader Representative Robert L. Johnson III. Representative, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start by reading part of your joint statement about these bills. You say HB 1020 and SB 2889 are an insult and a distraction, taking power away from the citizens of our capital city while we waste critical hours sitting around and letting hospitals close and our people die. You go on to say these bills are what modern day Jim Crow looks like. Explain to us how this bill even got this far along in the process to begin with.
Well, we have a supermajority-led House and Senate and a Republican governor. And as I described them from time to time, they are kind of new to this process. And they don't have any respect for the rules, procedure, or the tradition of the legislature. And so we don't even, there are even opportunities to debate some of these issues. They've just decided that they're just going to run roughshod over the whole process and have what they want.
All right, so just break it down for us in layman terms. If this were to pass, what would this mean for the black residents?
Well, they would essentially have judges who would be appointed by a Supreme Court justice who was appointed by this very governor that is engineering this effort. They wouldn't have any say-so in that judgeship, those multiple judgeships, and so those people would answer to no one who lives in Hinds County. Not only would that judge not be elected, that judge could come from anywhere in the state. And so that the Constitution says all of our judges should be elected, shall be elected. And so this takes that right to vote, that right to exercise their constitutional power from the people in the city of Jackson. So all the cases, I mean, it would be the most important part of this. So all the cases that anybody brings against the state of Mississippi, and we bring them all the time. I'm a lawyer. If you sue the state of Mississippi, they have to come through the circuit or chancery court in Hinds County. There was a time when we were fighting for more money for public education. And one of the things that they wanted to challenge was the constitutionality of the referendum proposal. One of the white Republican legislators told his constituents, if we pass this referendum, then you'll have to answer to a black judge in Hinds County. That, you know, there are these little phrases, these invites that they have that always point to race.
Is there a chance that this bill will die in the Senate?
There is a chance the bill will die in the Senate. Thankfully, because of the uproar, because of the push that many of us have had from lawyers to community activists to legislators, I think, and the national pressure from people like just the exposure from networks, from people like you, they are feeling the pressure. This does look like Jim Crow, like post-Reconstruction. This looks like everything that some of us who are old enough remember growing up through the Civil Rights Movement, the things that we fought to reverse.
Representative, curious, I know your intention is to stop it, but let's just play devil's advocate here. Are you concerned that if this bill does become law, would it create a new template for a Republican fight for the years to come, similar to what's happened with critical race theory law, for example?
Well, yes. Look, we tell people, we've been telling people all over the state, this is not a Jackson problem. This is a Mississippi problem. If they're going to do it to Jackson, they'll do it to Greenville, Greenwood, anywhere they want to go. They want to create a city within a city that just serves a particular segment of the population. This capital city complex has a disproportionate white population, doesn't represent the actual per capita demographic in the city of Jackson. And this is a template for what they'll do in any city that has Black or African-American leadership. And so, yes, the danger is that this is the route Republicans will continue to do in places where they lose political power.
Mississippi Democratic Minority Leader Representative.
And it's true. And that is modern day Jim Crow. Now, for all those that are wondering what the bill is about, well, bill is basically this. In Mississippi, in Hinds Ward County, that, as I said, usually for judges and things that nature are usually elected by the city and the county that they're in. In this case, what they're trying to do is actually trying to have that power taken away from the hands of those that live in said town and have someone else who, again, can't be countered, can't be argued. It's pretty much saying, like, look, we're going to appoint this person to be over that county, and that's it. Now, the thing about this is that city, the majority of them are Black residents. So you're saying Black residents are not allowed to elect their own to serve in their own county, but the state has decided that it needs to step in and permit this bill in order to do so. I think it's very contradictory, considering that Mississippi is probably one of the reddest states that you could be a part of. And the thing about it is, it's Jim Crow. Imagine the fact that you, as a city, you're not allowed to take up your own. You are not allowed to take up or do your own town proceedings and procedures and elect your officials, but the state does it for you. And even more so, that if the bill does pass, it is modern day Jim Crow. Imagine your capacity to vote for things that you want to put in, vote for the people, by the people. Doesn't really matter if the state's taken over, which I think is very hypocritical coming from Mississippi, and how the governor there is mighty quiet about that. But there's a reason. But again, it's one of those things where I say it comes with conservatives. It makes no sense, especially in the sense where I can't believe we're going to be talking about this, but here we go. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman who basically got paid her first term for doing nothing. You got to remember her talks of QAnon, her clashes with other fellow politicians, got her removed from her congressional obligations. And now, because Kevin McCarthy has instilled her on the Homeland Security Committee, Marjorie Taylor Greene has, again, for a comedian, she gives you gold. But as a person who realizes that she could influence the country in ways that can harm us, she decides to go on Sean Hannity to defend her Twitter post as she says, America needs a national divorce between red states and blue states. I wish I could make this up.
All right, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene made waves over the holiday weekend with this tweet calling for a national divorce. After facing backlash from Democrats and some Republicans, Greene followed up with a detailed thread explaining why she thinks this is a good idea. Greene is saying that a national divorce would empower individual states to form a smaller government, reduce the federal debt, set their own environmental standards. And the Congresswoman has another idea as well, banning people who move from blue states to red states from voting for 5 years so they don't bring their bad politics with them. I actually favor that idea. Anyway, here with more is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I read this and then I read your comments on it. I think most people instinctively want this to be the United States of America. And here's my question. How did you get to this point? I mean, I look at topics, for example, how do you reconcile defund the police and no bail laws with law and order? How do you reconcile secure borders and wide open borders? How do you reconcile energy independence with energy dependence and new Green Dealism? How do you reconcile peace through strength with people that want to gut our defense? I don't see middle ground on a lot of these issues. So what is the other answer if it's not a divorce?
Well, exactly, Sean. That's the problem and where we are today. And in my life, in my world, all of my friends are regular Americans. Everyone I talk to is sick and tired and fed up of being bullied by the left, abused by the left, and disrespected by the left. And our ideas, our policies, our ways of life have become so far apart that it's just coming to that point. And the last thing I ever want to see in America is a civil war. No one wants that. At least everyone I know would never want that. but it's going that direction, and we have to do something about it. We're also a nation, a crumbling nation. We're a nation in distress. Our government is in complete failure, over $34 trillion. We're on the verge of default, and we have to do something about that. But that was the right and the left that did that to the American people on their own. But the Democrats never stopped pushing their policies, their ideas, and their culture on Republicans and the right. And we are so sick and tired of it. We are tired of our children being taught ideas and ideologies in school that we do not want our children taught, like gender lies. We do not want our children having their gender change or transitioned. We can't even have women's sports and privacy in our bathrooms, and women in prison can't even have spaces. ESG, environmental social governance, has completely taken over corporations, and this is a huge policy pressed on private businesses through the government from Democrats. If you're a white male today in the financial industry, you can forget it. You're a dinosaur. You're going extinct. No one should ever be hired by their skin color or their gender or how
Marjorie,
they
let me ask you
identify.
this.
It should only be about your character and your ability to do the job.
What do you say to your critics that say that our country's governed by our Constitution? You swore an oath to defend it. Is there any way that America, in spite of our differences, are we at a point where, okay, you either win an election and your side is up to bat, or you lose an election and their agenda gets pushed forward? Or do you actually think there will be a growing movement towards this because the divide is so deep?
I actually think this is a much bigger movement than most people in Washington even realize. And you can take a look at the tweets that I made just yesterday. The amount of likes and retweets that those tweets got should tell people a lot. And they're just not aware of it yet because they don't talk to regular people. You see, this isn't ending our union. This is shrinking the federal government, which we need to stop our spending. Our spending is out of control. We can abolish departments and different parts of our federal government and give states more power and control to conduct their affairs and their laws that fit the people that live in those states. This is more respectful towards all Americans, and it could end the fight.
I just love how the music starts playing because they were trying to cut her off as soon as humanly possible. They were trying to cut her off. It was like watching an award show. It's like watching an award show where they're trying to hurry up and rush the person off because they know how bad it is. Yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene, ladies and gentlemen, decides that not only do we need a national divorce, we need to actually put a ban on those who leave a red state from a blue state because we don't want them taking their bad politics with them. It is amazing every time I watch Fox News, and I try not to watch it because I don't want my brain to hurt, is the fact that they always it's scare theater. It's really what it is. It's scary, it's scare theater. They pounce on the unseasoned mayo's fears, and you can tell because they make it seem like they're the victims, they're being attacked, they're being bullied, and all this stuff. And it's amazing to me. But again, back to Marjorie Taylor Greene about literally, she wants to have a split between red states and blue states. Now, it's always funny when Marjorie Taylor Greene says that she thinks she says something intelligent, but she forgets something: numbers. And that if we were to go through her plan, wouldn't work out very well for the Republicans.
So the very bad map we see at every presidential election showing huge swaths of red, I mean, it's flawed and a myth because land doesn't vote, people do. The reality is we are a nation not divided by states, but rather by counties. It's one reason Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for secession isn't just inconceivable as well as foolish. It would be disastrous for Republican voting states. An analysis of the 2020 election by the Brookings Institution showed that Biden's winning base in 500 counties, just 500 counties, encompassed 71% of America's economic activity, while Trump's losing base of 2,500 counties represented just 29% of the economy. And that's because blue states tend to be urban and suburban with large populations, while red counties tend to be smaller, more rural, and sometimes with more cows and corn stalks than people. Economically, it's not even a fair fight. Joining me now are MSNBC political analysts Matthew Dowd and Cornell Belcher. And Matthew, I want to go to you first. This sort of fetish for secession, I remember Sarah Palin's husband was sort of indulging in it. These red state folks keep saying it, but they don't understand the economics of it would really be awful for red states. The states that are the most dependent on the federal government to keep their economies alive are almost all red states: Alaska, Mississippi, Kentucky, West Virginia, Montana, New Mexico, Arizona, Louisiana, Indiana, Alabama. Only New Mexico is a blue state. The least federally dependent states, almost all blue states. Blue states are the donor states: California, Colorado, Massachusetts, you can go on, Illinois, Delaware, New Jersey, et cetera. Why do they keep indulging in this?
Because they don't care about the economic implications of it. I mean, I think that's fundamental to what they're doing and what they've not done in Washington, D.C. What they care about is the cultural implications of this. That's what they fundamentally care about, because they have a singular culture they want to establish. And since they can't do it as the United States as a whole, they want to do it state by state. The other thing, and I found it peculiar that she used this term divorce in this process. And sometimes, as we know, that in a divorce, sometimes the person falls in love with somebody else or another individual and wants out. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has fallen in love with another country. That happens to be Russia in the course of this. And she likes what's going on in Russia far more than what she likes going on here in the United States. She likes Putin's brand of leadership far more than she likes Joe Biden's brand of leadership. And so that's what I think this is fun. It's a cultural, this is not an economic concern of theirs. This is a cultural concern of theirs. And it fundamentally doesn't understand what it means to be in the United States of America. United States of America.
And I'd stop it right there, just because, again, numbers matter. If Marjorie Taylor Greene really got what she wanted, and I mean really got what she wanted, she would be very mad. Why would she be mad? Because as numbers don't lie, because voting is done by counties. And let's be honest, the last election, more counties voted for Biden than they did for Trump. Now, if she wants to separate the blue states from the red states, again, this does not fare well for Republican-led red states. They will suffer. So again, I know with Marjorie Taylor Greene, you can't take anything serious that she says. The problem is, though, she is now backed by a party that has taken over the House of Representatives that can dang near try to push legislation through, or at least try to set up to where the next presidential candidacy run in 2024 swings in their favor. And God only helps us if Biden or another Democrat doesn't win. Not saying that Biden is the answer, but at least there is some measure that the whole House won't burn down. But there may be some things you might disagree with, which we'll get to later about Biden. But let's stick with Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Republicans' love for dictatorships, especially the dictator in Florida, Ron DeSantis, who is going to have a little bit of a hard time considering students are walking out in protest to Mr. DeSantis's latest changes to their educational curriculum, if you will.
They marched from FIU's main campus towards the surrounding streets. DeSantis, go away! Banging drums, chanting, and holding signs along the way.
We need strength in numbers, but more than anything, it's our fight. It's a fight of all marginalized communities, and we need to come together and show that.
It's all part of a walkout held today by FIU students who say they're angry at Governor Ron DeSantis over rhetoric and the recent passage of laws they feel target gay, trans, and Black people, as well as a recent request by DeSantis to Florida's public universities to hand over health data on students seeking gender-related care from campus health services. The walkout coincided with walkouts held at schools across Florida with similar goals in mind.
A lot of students aren't aware that he's holding a lot of bans or certain thought processes that can be exclusionary for DI initiatives, aka diversity and inclusion initiatives. That would hurt our own centers here at FIU, which would include the Office of Social Justice, the Women's Center, the Black Student Union, and even the Pride Student Union.
As a trans person, it's very scary to live in the state of Florida right now just because of the stuff that is happening, and it feels like they're trying to get rid of us.
The walkout coincided with walkouts held at schools across Florida with similar goals in mind.
March 7th is the first legislative session. We will be there. This is just the beginning.
And again, I love this. I love to see students actually taking up and being very proactive, especially when it comes to dictator DeSantis and the fact that he wants to single-handedly have a hand in just, again, teaching things that they want to be taught. Keep in mind, critical race theory is not being taught anywhere, as I've repeated multiple times on this podcast. I've also sat there and said, judging on behalf of the education that's going around this country, maybe it should. But I love that Florida students are taking up and being like, you know what? No, we don't like this. We will walk out. We will protest, as they should, until Dictator DeSantis tries to remove that right too. But unfortunately, it's not Florida that's also looking at how they can turn around. Well, I won't say Florida. Governor DeSantis, or Dictator DeSantis, isn't the only one. Virginia, however, Virginia's governor, Glenn Youngkin, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, is also reviewing the College Board's Advanced Placement African American Studies course to make sure that it pertains to their executive order, which he signed back in 2022, which, for all those that don't know, the executive order that he signed restricts or limits inherently divisive concepts and critical race theory teaching in schools. Yeah, and we just thought it was Florida, and now it's Virginia. Now, of course, that's a review. Doesn't mean anything as of yet, but this is the thing I keep saying. It's like, whenever, and this is why I sit there and tell people, I said, here's the thing. Why is it that when it comes to African-American history that people feel so threatened? And I say this to all the non-seasoned Mayo out there, because you guys love your history, but for some odd reason, you don't talk about the dark parts. You'll read every other diverse group's history, good or bad, and be fine with it. But yet, when it comes to African-American studies, it's almost like you don't want to be reminded that, yes, your ancestors made some particularly terrible decisions in America's history, and that America's history is, yeah, it's got some dark spots. I think it's about high time y'all admit it. Personally, I think it's beyond time that you need to admit it, because that's why. And the funny thing about it is, it makes no sense that you're trying to not talk about it, but at the same time, you have states like Florida and Virginia who are simply trying to whitewash history or not being taught. Because it's not just African American history, they're trying to go after books. Keep in mind, we just came off a year ago, where Texas, Oklahoma, and other states went after school libraries saying that POC authors or LGBTQ plus authors in their books had to be removed, that Twilight had to be removed, Harry Potter had to be removed, because apparently it's witchcraft, I guess. But those books had to be removed from school libraries because some thought that these were being wrong influences. But yet Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul seems to be unbothered. Figure that one out. But that was just a year ago. Back in 2022. Here we now are in 2023. They're going after education. They're going after education because, again, they are scared. And honestly, the late George Carlin, as a comedian, he said it best. They don't want critical thinking problem solvers. They want workers. Why? Workers don't question, workers don't control, workers follow a cycle, and workers do whatever one person tells them to do. They want workers. Because in school, what is it? A group of individuals following one person. What are most jobs? A group of individuals following one person. If you really think about it, almost every function in America has that same worker mindset up, but they don't want critical thinking people that question the norm. That's what scares conservatives. But again, we shouldn't be surprised by that. Like I said, this story just keeps going on. Florida and Virginia are just two states, but I fear that number is going to be added. There's going to be other states added to this, as there is an attack on education, and it's coming from conservatives as Democrats are trying to expand it. But another thing we did want to talk about, guys, because Biden administration is kind of taking a lot of L's this week. Reason being is because he was actually in, of course, surprise trip. Instead of going to East Palestine when the train derailment happened, he decided to make a surprise trip to Kiev, Ukraine, in which he sat there and thanked Poland for welcoming Ukrainian refugees. Now, again, this isn't usually bad because, again, the war war by dictator Putin invading Ukraine is still going on, while Poland has sat there and said we are welcoming our doors refugees, in which President Biden did thank Poland for taking in 1.5 million refugees from the war. The problem with that, however, is that you guys got to remember, which I said during the Wednesday podcast, that Biden's kind of taking an L because of their actual policy now for asylum seekers here in the U.S. Now, again, if you don't remember, the new border policy that they do have is just that, hey, if you actually cross countries not citing for asylum in these areas before coming to the U.S., that basically prevents you from granting asylum. A lot of people are a little bit mad again because there's another story that's coming out about the Biden administration. That story basically is that the U.S. has admitted 271,000 Ukrainian refugees since the Russian invasion nearly a year ago. That's far above the 100,000 that Biden has promised to bring in. So that's actually more than double of his promise. And a lot of people, especially those who are looking at the border, are looking at the Biden administration going, wait a minute. So you brought over nearly 272,000 Ukrainians, refugees, but those who are sitting at the border right now are stuck and also being subjected to a new law. This is not a good look. It's not a good look at all. So the Biden administration is going to have a hard time trying to explain this one, that you took in nearly 271,000 Ukrainians, but those at the Mexican border, SOL? It's kind of hard to explain that, Biden. It really is, considering the fact that, again, that's been the problem in the country. The two biggest systems that we have in this country that are completely fracked up, the immigration system and the VA and the VA system, both of them. But yet immigration can be easily solved. We could streamline the process. We can actually give more resources to immigration, more judges, more lawyers, more office clientele to actually help us and actually streamline the immigration service. Because at one point, the only thing we had going for us out of immigration was the DREAM Act, and Republicans hated it. Don't know why, because if an immigrant decides to serve for his country, which again, Republicans love the troops. If you serve your country, then yes, you're on a path to citizenship. No problem. Republicans hated that. I don't know why, because again, you got the service that you want out of them so bad, because that's what they usually say. You got service out of them. But at the same time, it's now like, oh well. But again, I don't see Republicans providing an immigration service. I don't see them providing an immigration plan. They're too busy shooting down Democratic plans out of fear that somehow these immigrants will vote and transform our country. Newsflash, conservatives. In the next 10 to 15 years, the country's going to change, and you're not going to like the way it looks. Just being honest with you. But switching gears for a second, it's Black History Month, and yet we find ourselves with stories like this that just, let me just play it.
They were Black History Month cards. So one person gave her one, and then the second child thought they could make a better one.
Those cards came in crayon to her biracial daughter, Chloe, calling her my favorite monkey, and another a stick figure hanging from a tree, and another titled my favorite cotton picker. Chloe is in the 6th grade.
She knows she's Black and really embraces her culture, but maybe felt that Black is different. Because before, we are all, Black, Hispanic, white, but it was never in a way that she was felt different.
Or unsafe.
Definitely unsafe.
Marlene Reynoso's daughter is a student at Pepper Tree Elementary School in Upland, California, where she says racial bullying began with these cards, then continued verbally. But this wasn't happening just to her child.
That our daughter was told that she was going to get one too, that it was going to be a slave hanging from a tree and say that you're my favorite slave.
There's what I thought were clouds, but it says cotton. Like, it was very detailed, very specific.
They're made out of crayons.
Yes, out of crayons. It's coming from somewhere. The parents. These are the parents of the kids that my kids go to school with.
School board meetings across the country have increasingly become the setting for the nation's culture wars. But within school halls, the U.S. Government Accountability Office says race-related hate is a widespread problem. 1 in 4 students between age 12 to 18 reported seeing hate words or symbols on campus. And of the more than 5 million students who reported being bullied, 1 of 4 were targeted because of their race or identity. In Upland, a suburb nestled in the hills east of Los Angeles, the district superintendent said in a video response to the public that there will be no tolerance for racist behavior.
Anyone engaging in hateful, racist, discriminatory, or otherwise bullying behaviors will be held accountable.
It hurts. These are my babies.
But the Douglas children remain at home. Chloe, who first got the cards, also has not returned to class. These parents, concerned for their children's safety after a lesson they never should have learned at school.
They need to see now, and they're seeing it in a very harsh way. They're seeing it that not everyone is going to accept or be accepting of them for who they are.
And we did reach.
And that's crazy, isn't it? 6th grade. And he is 100% right. First time I read the story, I'm like, dang, it's Florida. No, it's California. It's California where this happened, and I can't sit there and say it enough. Yeah, they're learning it from somewhere, but that's the one thing we keep saying. You know, it's amazing where we know stuff like this happening, where there is somewhat an allowance on those in different races. We can talk about the January 6th insurrection, but they don't call it what it is, terrorists. They don't call it when black people are attacked. We don't call white people terrorists, although they should be called that. Or we see hanging, or we see lynches, or ropes hanging from trees, or crosses burning, or KKK, or things of that nature. We don't call them what they are. But again, when you see a child do this to another child, where else can we sit there and say, yeah, it's coming from somewhere. Ignorance isn't hereditary, it's learned. And and I hate to say it, this affects black children to the point to where a lot of people understand this is the trauma that usually happens that we're associated with, because somebody's parents out there didn't give the home training and pass along to their kids. But again, I said it before, I'll say this again, like I said on my previous podcast, the quickest thing those parents will probably do is take those kids out of elementary school. I said, no, don't take those kids out of elementary school. Not at all. You want to know how you fix the problem? Easy. Scared straight black people style. Put them kids with nothing but black people. Put them kids with a group of people they are unfamiliar with. I guarantee 2 things are going to happen. They will reform, or they will experience the same trauma that they put on others. Either way, it'll be effective. Mark my words on that. But speaking of things that need to be marked off on, the train derailment that happened in East Palestine. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. The NTSB did give the report. Surprise, surprise. It could have been preventable.
Frustration over that toxic train derailment in Ohio. The residents there voicing their concerns as we learn more about the final moments right before the wreck. Alex Brochet is in Ohio with the latest. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, Lindsay. Yes, as the cleanup effort continues here in East Palestine, this community has even more questions following the release of that NTSB preliminary report.
How concerned should we be?
This morning, residents in East Palestine sounding off after hearing the NTSB say bluntly that toxic train derailment didn't have to happen.
This was 100% preventable. We call things accidents. There is no accident. Every single event that we investigate is preventable.
The NTSB releasing its initial findings on that crash, which dumped massive amounts of chemicals in the small Ohio town. Federal investigators scrutinizing surveillance video see the sparks and that fire. The NTSB says it shows what appears to be a wheel bearing in the final stage of overheat moments before the derailment. According to federal investigators, the train passed through 3 sensors, showing the temperature near the wheel skyrocketing from 38 degrees to 253 degrees inside of 30 miles. Norfolk Southern responding to the report, saying it's inspecting all of its nearly 1,000 wayside heat detectors out of an abundance of caution. And facing backlash from some Republicans for not visiting sooner, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg on the ground here Thursday, responding to the criticism.
What I tried to do was balance two things: my desire to be involved and engaged and on the ground, and my desire to follow the norm of transportation secretaries.
The White House press secretary says President Biden has been satisfied thus far with the federal response here in East Palestine. She would not commit to whether the president himself will visit.
You would think so, but again, if the president could show up in Ukraine, he could really show up in East Palestine. But surprise, surprise, it was 100% preventable. We did hear us talk about the train issue, to where, especially with certain breaks that were approved and was regulated in the Obama administration, was taken down by the Trump administration. Which again, most railroad companies will sit there and complain about the cost of having that addition on their trains. But if you think about it in the long run, they're going to be paying at least twice that amount. If Norfolk Southern is held to the fire, we'll be paying at least 4 times the amount it would have taken to prevent this. As it is 100% preventable of an ecological disaster happening in that particular city that residents are still dealing with. So I can't blame Pete Buttigieg. I can't, because the government regulation really should have been about cleanup. Now that the cleanup is being underway, yeah, the other part of that, I will sit there and say Norfolk Southern should be held accountable for everything. The cleanup, compensation for people for their homes, pets if they were compromised or even dead, or just people with ailments. Yes, that company should be liable for the bill on everything and then some. That's where the government should be holding its feet to the fire on that. But again, we'll follow that as it goes along. But it just goes to show you, yes, it was 100% preventable and should have been. But again, this is what happens when companies take shortcuts to increase profit over protection. But another thing we got before we get to our feel good news segment, because we do got 2 of those today. This one I have been saying, at least for the last 3 years, before the pandemic, that Americans are really overworked. I mean, a 5, 6, or even 7-day work week. I mean, forget work-life balance. Every night you feel like you close your eyes for 5 minutes and you're right back up and have to do the whole 8 to 10 or 12-hour grind, depending on your shift is. But Americans are overworked, really and truly. And there's a study that's coming out that that some companies are trying and actually finding great benefits. But for everybody else, we're like, thank you for finally joining the party about the 4-day work week.
Put away the laptops and the hard hats. The American work week may be headed for the most profound change in nearly 100 years, with more companies shifting from a 5-day week to 4.
It's been life-changing. Really, it's been a wonderful experience.
Crowdfunding platform Kickstarter went from 5 to 4 days last year, hoping to offer a better work-life balance and retain valuable employees. Surprise! The company says productivity increased, employees better rested and more engaged.
People are able to spend time with their families and spend time doing things they love, and they're happier at work and better at work as a result.
Similar findings from a large study involving 61 British companies that went to 4-day, 32-hour weeks last year. 92% say they're sticking with 4 days. 71% reported employees were less stressed and burned out, most saying they're better able to balance home and family commitments, while company revenues actually increased by 35% on average. Researchers say the flex hours that came with the pandemic accelerated the paradigm shift, with many employees, not just white-collar workers, getting more free time. And now 15% say no amount of money will convince them to go back to 5 days.
In the United States, we got a 5-day work week in the 1930s, and the pandemic really accelerated the thinking. It sort of opened employers' eyes to the idea that they could put in an innovation like this.
So far, larger companies have been slow to embrace the change, some concerned that customer service will suffer. Because once you go to 4 days, it's hard to ask employees to work 5. Tom Costello.
At the same time, once you have employees go to remote and they realize how easy it is to work at home, you're going to find it very hard for them to come back in the office. I'm not against this. I have been saying this for at least the last 10 years, that America needs to go with the times, because a lot of countries out there do adopt a 4-day work week, Why? Because if you're like me and you're extremely busy, you have other responsibilities that cannot be done on the weekends. Sometimes you do need a day during the week to get stuff done, especially if you're trying to go to a state or government-related facility. If you're trying to get something done like renewing your license or plates or anything that needs to be done at the county clerk's office, you can't do that on a Saturday. So a Thursday or a Friday is perfect, or depending on how your 4-day work week schedule goes. But a 4-day work week is productive. The problem is we are in a capitalist society where companies want to sit there and say a work-life balance, but really they want to push you to the point to where you're all about work, and yet wonder why we have so many workaholics. But a 4-day work week can work. It just depends on enough companies that are willing to do it. But again, much like the Norfolk Southern, it's usually profit over people, even though they swear up and down. And I say this all the time. If you're ever at a company that says we're like a family, run far, run fast. Now, we're going to go into our feel-good segment, because usually how the fact we got here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we can use faith, humanity, but hey, it's the weekend. We want to leave you guys out with a couple of good stories. Yes, we actually have 2 of them this time, feel-good segments, especially since it's Black History. This one in particular is about the first ever owned Black station that they're actually having a reunion of those that have worked there in Detroit.
Hi, good morning. I know, I brought some Detroit weather.
You want some coffee? Good? Water?
No, I don't drink coffee.
All right. How do you drink coffee?
Sean Robinson worked with her stylist to find the perfect outfit for an upcoming shoot.
I love that.
And for a couple of upcoming Oscars parties.
Oh, this is cute.
I thought that was super cute. So for 90-day, I just got note they don't want yellow.
Oh, I love yellow.
I know.
The beloved TV personality has been reporting for almost 30 years, from her start in local news in Miami.
We're always passing in the night, morning, night. We'll see you later on. Don't miss Deck and Drive at 7:30.
To the national stage, co-hosting Access Hollywood.
I'm Sean Robinson. As an Access Hollywood host, I get to interview the biggest stars on the red carpet.
Now, as the face of one of the most highly rated shows on cable television, reality TV sensation 90 Day Fiancé.
To make sure you give us straight answers, we're going to hook you up to an actual polygraph.
All right.
AKA a lie detector machine.
But it all started many years ago at a small local TV station in Detroit, Michigan. WGPR.
The Big City News Crew.
Good evening.
The first African-American owned and operated television station in the country.
Big City News. News and information for the urbanite.
Describe sort of the importance of seeing someone who looks like you on television, of people who eat the food you eat, who maybe are familiar with that neighborhood, who there's so much value there.
Yes, I remember coming home, and then at 6 o'clock, my grandmother would turn on the evening news, and there was a Black woman by the name of Beverly Payne. And I would sit there and look at her on the evening news, and I knew she was different because she looked like me.
Sean started out working as an intern. She hit the ground running, interviewing people and filing local stories. Eventually, she got her own primetime talk show, Strictly Speaking.
Welcome back to Strictly Speaking. Now, we have already talked about single people who are dating people of another color. Now, the next step, marriage.
WGPR was on the airwaves from 1975 to 1995. The old station, now turned into a museum, honors its pivotal role in the history of television and its hand in developing Black talent. Another notable alum, ESPN executive Dave Roberts.
WGPR is part of our history. It's part of the legacy of who we are, how we became who we are, and it will define where we're going down the road.
It wasn't just the on-air talent. Superstar guests also walked these halls, such as Muhammad Ali.
I'm the real $6 million man.
The original T.O.
On this Black History Month, some of those alums came back for a reunion at the museum, an opportunity to share memories and reminisce about the legends who used to grace their studio.
You look at the level of talent that came through here. I mean, there's James Brown down there and all kinds of artists over the years. And the beauty of it, because it was a television and radio station, we drew all kinds of people. I'll never forget.
I mean, they would come and they would say they came because of who we are. Right. Della Reese, Max Roach, James Baldwin came here 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Former program director Joe Spencer was in charge of recruiting those young, hopeful reporters who would go on to do great things.
How was GPR a pioneer?
One of our great legacies was that we brought in people who had never had jobs, because back in 1973, 74, 75, if a young man like yourself would go to a TV station in the market and ask for a job, the first thing they said, "Oh, you got any experience?" And the answer was no, but they were able to come here, learn their craft, and was able to move on to other jobs and other opportunities.
Critical work for an industry still struggling to increase diversity among its ranks. According to the Radio, Television, Digital News Association, in 2021, only about a quarter of staffers in local TV newsrooms were people of color.
Hi.
Back in LA, Sean Robinson gears up for the latest season of 90 Day Fiancé.
You ready? Yeah. Okay.
Recording her lines at a local studio.
Join us as the couples discuss their rocky journeys, all in the pursuit of love.
Keeping with her the lessons she learned at WGPR.
I'm just realizing the gravity and the importance that WGPR had, not only to the Black community here in Detroit, but Black people nationwide, because all of these great people came out of this television station and went on to do some amazing things.
In the wake of George Floyd and so many other incidents that have happened and have come to light across the country, a lot of times it's been journalists of color who stick with the story. So much of that started with the people who started here and fighting for those stories and fighting for that voice. When you see that, do you recognize that?
Working at WGPR, you never had to fight for a story that was relevant to the Black community. You just never had to do that. I was always a champion of telling stories, positive stories about our community, because there's too many negative stories out there. And I hope that, especially now we're in Black History Month, let's not have the story stop at the end of the month. We got to keep telling these stories over and over and over again.
Our thanks to Alec.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool to actually learn that, just because I myself did not know about the first Black-owned TV station. That's Detroit's WGPR. But it's cool to learn that. It's also cool to learn that, hey, it is completely okay to like your coffee, especially this couple who is actually trying to not only, further their brand with their particular style of outdoor coffee, but trying to include a lot of diversification with the outdoors. I mean, not me. I'm not an outdoors person, but hey, you guys support your Black business and also support local Black businesses. But me and outdoors, no, not since we have civilization. But here you go.
I feel like we're like the hip hop of coffee. We're innovative. We're roasting like nobody else roasts. Really honoring that tradition of this is how people historically enjoyed coffee. Just fire from wood, beans in a drum, and they're just rotating over the fire. And yeah, it's super on brand for us. We're Campfire Coffee. We should be roasting over a campfire. The idea to do something about diversity in the outdoor space really started when we decided to open Campfire. You hear all of these kind of different little tropes about why people of color are not in the outdoors. Yeah, Black people don't camp. Is there a Marriott in the woods? I mean, there's bears in the woods. This big cultural barrier.
There's already too many places where people of color don't feel welcome, and outdoors shouldn't be one of those places.
We are a coffee company. We are very much involved in our nonprofit side of the business, where we do have a gear library for people to check out camping gear. We support other nonprofit organizations as well that have a very similar mission to ours. To be able to say that we've worked with camps in pretty much all of the US, it seems unreal. And we're getting tagged in posts in getting thank yous for, we might have raised enough money to get just one kid to go to camp, and that kid had the best time. Not only can provide these opportunities for our kids, but we're providing them for hundreds, if not thousands more kids across the country. When we started, quite honestly, we were in my mom's garage, sleeping in the RV in the driveway, just trying to get through to the next thing. To have a top-selling coffee in a store like Trader Joe's in Washington, Oregon, Idaho anyway, right? Like, that feels unreal. There's still so much work to do around making the outdoors more accessible for kids, for people of color. We want our kids to have the feeling in their mind that this is just normal for us. Like, I think to normalize it, you have to make it normal.
We want our children to be outside. We want to let them know, like, you belong outdoors. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you shouldn't be outside because of the color of your skin.
You don't have to be an alpinist, a mountaineer going and climbing El Capitan tomorrow. Like, you don't have to like buy into the imagery that is out there. You can do whatever. Just be outside and enjoy it.
Yeah, I give them that. I mean, yes, I the outdoors is great. I'm not into camping just because, we have civilization. I like indoors, but hey, it is a great teaching tool. It is, and they are completely right that there is a big stigma. And basically to open up the outdoors to all, to enjoy nature as it is, can't knock it. And of course, it's coffee. I'm going to be needing a lot of that in a couple months, but that being said, guys, gonna do it for this podcast. So I do thank everybody that liked, that watched, that shared, let people know it's live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before I do get out of here, guys. I do want to shout out to my buddy Big VZA Dot. You can find Big VZA Dot on all socials, including his YouTube page, where he does have his beats for sale. So definitely check him out there. Of course, my add-on, Blackbox447 on all socials. I usually post everything that I watch, that I read, that I play, that I see, including gym stuff sometimes. So I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, the link at the bottom, let me make that just a wee bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, it'll take you to my link tree that has YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course, the Off Limits podcast. So definitely like, share, subscribe, let people know about it. I certainly appreciate it. And also, let me know what you think of the show. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Were there things that you might disagree with? I want to keep the conversation going. I'm a very conversational person. But yeah, aside from that, guys, I will say this as well. If you haven't noticed, COVID transmissions are back high again. So if you are traveling, you're going to be in an area with a large number of people, please wear a mask. Please protect yourself. If you're feeling sick, please stay home. The only way we're going to beat these variants and HSV and RSV that's out there, guys, is to protect ourselves. And also to give our people in the housing and hospital professions a break. Nurses, doctors, and those that work there, give them a break because they've been doing the Lord's work for the last couple of years, and they deserve a lot more than just our appreciation. That's a whole nother story. But again, protect yourself. That's all I ask. Also, before I wrap this up, guys, I say this now because, again, in 2023, I want to promote positivity. There is no competition between you and the next person. The only competition you have is yourself. We are all running different races. That's why each of us succeed at different times. We're not all on the same track. We're not always going to win at the same time. We're not always going to, hit that moment to where we may at the same time. But if it's not your time, celebrate someone else's, because it's easier to be positive than it's take more energy to be negative. So again, also, because there is no competition, I am rooting for you. I will support you. I will share your stuff for others to see because I want you to succeed. I will be your biggest cheerleader, but at the same time, it depends upon you to make it happen. You have to put in the work. Simple as that. Also, at the same time, guys, I'm a very social person online. Love talking to new people, but I have one rule. Don't be a dick. I will treat you the same way you treat me. So don't be a dick. We'll be cool. The last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, guys, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information and allowing you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better as society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to change that. We try to basically right our wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black 4-star military general. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why did everything go up on my paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the fact we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Have an amazing weekend.